The palace of Viralia stood on a cliff of white stone, looking over the silver sea. Its towers shone in the sun, but there was no joy in the throne room that day. Queen Serenia sat on her high seat, her long gown flowing across the steps, her silver crown heavy on her head. Her eyes, once bright, now seemed empty. The war had taken too much from her people, and it had taken her heart. Only a season ago, her daughter, Princess Leora, had been playing in the royal gardens, chasing the small winged lights that floated among the flowers. Serenia had laughed and clapped as she watched her run, but then the alarms had sounded. The enemy, the Krail, Dominion, had struck without warning, sending black ships to rain fire on the city. In the chaos, the guards had rushed the princess toward the hidden escape passages. Serenia had been pulled toward the command room, screaming for her child. By the time she reached the safe chamber, it was too late. The guards who had been with Leora were gone, and so was the princess. Searches were made, soldiers sent out, ships launched in every direction. Nothing was found. Some said the Krail had taken her. Some said she had been lost in the burning streets. Serenia refused to believe her daughter was gone, but every day without word was another stone on her heart. Now, months later, the war dragged on. Her people fought bravely, but the Krail's fleets were larger and their weapons crueler. Each day, messages came from the front lines, each filled with new losses. And each night, Serenia stood on the balcony looking to the stars, hoping for a sign. None came. Far from Viralia, in the deep black of space, a human vessel drifted between asteroids. Inside, Captain Elias Kane studied a glowing holomap. Kane was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair showing a trace of gray. He had served in the Earth Fleet for many years, but now worked with the Interstellar Peace Corps, a small, underfunded force sent to dangerous sectors to protect civilians. It was a hard job, often thankless, but Kane believed in it. War, he thought, should never be left to swallow the weak. A message flashed across his console. The words came from a distant listening post near the edge of Krail territory. The report was short, almost lost in the noise of other transmissions, but it made Kane lean closer. Unidentified juvenile alien, detained by Krail forces, female, estimated age 10 standard years, held on Fortress Moon Orvan. Kane opened. The image file attached to the message. The picture was grainy, as if it had been taken from far away. A young girl sat on a stone floor, her dark hair tangled, her eyes fixed on the door. Even through the blur, Kane saw the royal markings on her wrist, the same crest worn by Viralia's rulers. He remembered the reports from months before, the missing princess, the queen's endless search. This girl matched the description perfectly. If she was alive, then she had been a prisoner all this time. Kane leaned back, exhaling slowly. Fortress Moon Orvan was deep in enemy space, guarded by Krail warships and patrol drones. Getting there would be almost impossible. Getting out again with a hostage, even harder. But the thought of leaving her there, alone in that stone cell, gnawed at him. Peace Corps missions were meant to protect all civilians, no matter their world. And this was not just any child. She was the hope of her people. He tapped the comm link on his wrist. "Lieutenant Sarah," he said, "I need the crew in the briefing room. We've got a job." In the dim-lit briefing room, his small team gathered. Sarah, his second-in-command, was quick-witted and always calm under pressure. Drav, a quiet engineer from the ice moon Xi, could fix anything that had wires or gears. And Morrow, a pilot from Earth's Luna colonies, could fly a ship through the narrowest gaps in an asteroid field. Kane placed the hollow image of the girl in the center of the table. "This," he said, "is Princess Leora of Viralia. She's alive. The Krail have her on Fortress Moon Orvan." Sarah frowned. "That's deep in red zone space. Getting there means slipping through at least 3 blockade lines." Then we slip, Kane said simply. Drav leaned forward, his voice low. Even if we make it, Orvan's surface storms are constant. Ships can't land without shielding. Which is why we'll land outside the fortress range, Kane replied. Go in on foot, quiet, get her, get out. There was a pause. Morrow broke the silence with a slow grin. Sounds like suicide, Captain. When do we leave? Kane's lips curved into the faintest smile. As soon as we're ready, they began. Preparations at once. Drav worked on reinforcing the ship's shields for the stormy atmosphere. Sarah collected what supplies they could carry without slowing them down. Morrow studied the fortress layout from stolen schematics, planning a landing path between lightning zones. Kane sat alone in the cockpit for a moment, looking out at the stars. He knew this mission was dangerous, maybe the most dangerous he had ever taken. But he also knew the look in the Queen's eyes from the news broadcasts. A mother who would give anything to hold her child again. Somewhere, far beyond those stars, that child was waiting. He tightened his grip on the controls. Whatever it took, he was bringing her home. Ending hook for Part 1. The ship's engines came to life, their glow lighting the dark hangar. For the first time in months, Kane felt the quiet certainty that he was on the right path, even if it led straight into the heart of enemy space. The hum of the engines filled the narrow corridors of the ship's Starcrest. Captain Elias Kane stood at the cockpit window, watching the streaks of starlight pass. They were leaving safe space behind, heading toward the border of Krail territory, a place few ships dared to enter. Every second took them closer to the fortress moon where Princess Leora was being held. The crew moved with quiet focus. Lieutenant Sarah checked the navigation charts again, her hands gliding over the glowing control panels. Drav worked in the maintenance bay, testing the shield generator for the 10th time. Morrow sat in the pilot's chair, making small adjustments to their course. They all knew the risks. In enemy territory, even a single patrol drone could alert an entire fleet. If that happened, they would be trapped long before they reached Orvan. Kane walked into the briefing room one more time. On the table, a hollow projection of the Krail sector hovered in the air, a map filled with red zones and moving enemy patrols. This, Kane said, pointing to a cluster of moons, is the Orvan system. Orvan 4, the fortress moon, is here. He tapped the glowing point. Storm belts cover almost the entire surface, so the Krail rely on underground hangars for ships. If we land outside the storm perimeter, they won't see us. But we'll have to walk in. Sarah frowned. How far? 7 kilometers, Kane replied. Rough terrain. Acidic rain in some places, heavy winds in others. We'll need full environment suits. Morrow leaned back in his chair, smirking. Sounds like a holiday. Kane didn't smile. This is not a holiday. Once we're inside, we'll have a small window before reinforcements arrive. Get Leora, get out. No fights we don't have to start. Drav looked up from his datapad. If we move through the eastern canyon, we can avoid most drone patrols. But we'll have to pass near the lightning fields. One strike could fry the suit systems. Kane nodded. We'll take the risk. The direct route is suicide. Hours later, the Starcrest approached the border. The dark shape of a Krail patrol. Station floated ahead, its black hull marked with red lights. 2 small interceptor ships moved in lazy circles around it. Sarah's voice was calm. Transponder signal changed. They'll read us as a cargo hauler from the Rayan belt. Kane crossed his arms, watching the station grow larger. Let's hope they're in a lazy mood. The radio crackled with a sharp voice speaking in the Krail tongue. Morrow replied in perfect accent, sending a false cargo manifest. There was a long pause, then the patrol ships turned away. The station lights faded behind them. Kane let out a slow breath. We're in. 2 days later, the Starcrest drifted through an asteroid field, the Orvan system now close. Kane stood beside Morrow as they weaved through giant spinning rocks. The asteroids hid them from enemy scans, but the path was dangerous. One wrong. Move, and the ship would be smashed to pieces. In the crew quarters, Sarah checked the suits. Each one was reinforced for acidic rain, lightning strikes, and heavy wind pressure. Drav carried a pack of small EMP charges to disable security locks. Kane's own pack carried medical supplies, rations, and a short-range comm beacon. By the time they cleared the asteroid belt, the moon of Orven filled the cockpit view. Dark clouds swirled around it like a living thing, flashing with constant lightning. Even from here, they could see the faint glimmer of the fortress towers, barely visible through the storms. "This place," Morrow muttered, "is not welcoming." "Good," Kane said. "That means fewer people are stupid enough to come here." They began their descent. The ship shook as they hit the upper atmosphere. Winds slammed against the hull, and lightning lit the sky around them. Morrow's hands danced across the controls, keeping them steady. "Approaching drop zone!" Sarah called out. Kane pulled on his helmet, locking it with a sharp twist. The faceplate lit up, showing a clear readout of oxygen, shield level, and suit integrity. The Starcrest landed in a shallow canyon hidden by jagged rock walls. The storm howled above, but here in the canyon, the winds were softer. The ramp lowered, and the crew stepped out into the dim light. The ground was dark and wet, the air thick with the smell of metal and ash. Far away, the fortress towers rose, like teeth against the storm clouds. Kane led the way, his boots sinking slightly into the slick ground. Sarah scanned for movement, her visor display showing faint blips in the distance. Drav followed, carrying the heavy pack. Morrow brought up the rear, his rifle held ready. They moved through the canyon, keeping low. Once, a drone passed overhead, its searchlight sweeping across the rocks. They froze, pressed against the wall until it passed. Hours seemed to stretch, as they climbed over ridges and crossed narrow rock bridges. When they reached the eastern canyon Drav had mentioned, the air grew hotter, and the ground crackled beneath their boots. Forks of white lightning stabbed the ground nearby, leaving black scars in the stone. "Stay close," Kane said. "If you see a strike building, drop to the ground." It was slow going, but eventually they reached a narrow plateau overlooking the fortress. From here, they could see the landing pads, the watchtowers, and the main gates. The Krail moved, in precise patrols, their armor shining in the lightning flashes. Kane studied the layout through his visor. "We go in through the drainage tunnels. They connect to the lower prison levels." Sarah adjusted her scanner. "I'm picking up power. Fluctuations. Might be a storm, might be their generators. Either way, it's cover for us." Kane looked at each of them in turn. "Once we enter, we move fast. No turning back." Far inside the fortress, in a cold stone cell, Princess Leora sat with her knees pulled to her chest. She had learned to keep silent when the guards passed, to hide her fear. But tonight, she felt something different, a strange, sharp hope she couldn't explain. Outside her cell, the storm roared. And somewhere beyond those walls, a human warrior was coming for her. Ending hook for Part 2. Kane and his crew slipped down the plateau toward the hidden tunnel entrance, the storm's roar swallowing their footsteps. In the heart of the fortress, their target waited, and the enemy had no idea they were already inside their walls. The drainage tunnel smelled of metal and damp stone. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, steady drops. Kane crouched low, his suit light casting a narrow beam ahead. Behind him, Sarah moved silently, scanning for motion. Drav's pack clinked, with tools and EMP charges, while Morrow watched the rear for patrols. The tunnel walls narrowed as they went deeper. The sound of the storm outside faded, replaced by the hum of fortress machinery. Kane knew they were close. The lower prison levels were just above this route. They reached a grated wall blocking the way. Drav knelt and pulled a small device from his pack. It clicked softly as he placed it against the metal. A faint hiss, and the lock bolts melted away. Drav pushed the grate aside with a quiet nod. The tunnel opened into a dim maintenance corridor. Pipes lined the walls, and the air was warmer here, carrying the smell of engine oil. Footsteps echoed somewhere above. Kane raised a hand, signaling for silence. He tapped his visor, pulling up the stolen fortress map. 2 levels up, he whispered through the comm. Cell block 13. They climbed a narrow service ladder, the metal cold against their gloves. At the top, Kane eased open the hatch and peeked into a shadowed hallway. 2 Krail guards stood at the far end, their backs turned. Sarah pulled a small device from her belt, a sonic emitter. She tossed it down a side passage, and it released a faint hum. The guards turned toward the sound and walked away. Kane's team slipped through the hallway, moving from shadow to shadow. Every corner brought new danger: a passing guard, a patrolling drone, a locked security door. But Drav's tools and Sarah's timing kept them unseen. Finally, they reached the thick metal door marked Cell Block 13. A control panel glowed faintly beside it. Drav plugged in his tool, bypassing the security code in seconds. The door slid open with a low hiss. Inside, the block was silent except for the faint hum of the power lines. Rows of heavy doors lined the walls. Kane scanned the prisoner list. On the wall terminal, most names were unknown, but one stood out: Leora Serenia. Cell 13B, they moved quickly to the cell. Through the narrow viewing slot, Kane saw her. A small figure curled on the floor, her head resting on her knees. Her dark hair was tangled, but her back was straight, as if she refused to let her captors see weakness. Kane tapped the slot gently. "Princess Leora," he whispered. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wide, filled with both fear and hope. "You're not Krail," she said softly. "No," Kane replied. "I'm here to take you home." For a moment, she just stared. Then, she moved closer, her hands pressed to the slot. "Home?" "Yes. Your mother is waiting for you." Drav worked the lock quickly, the door sliding open. Kane stepped inside and knelt to her level. Her small hands were cold when he took them. "I need you to be brave a little longer," he said. "I can," she whispered. He wrapped a protective arm around her and led her out of the cell. The others formed a protective ring as they moved back toward the exit. But halfway down the block, an alarm blared, sharp, piercing, impossible to ignore. Red lights flashed along the ceiling. A voice shouted in the Krail language, and heavy boots thundered on the floor above. "They know," Sarah said. Kane's voice was calm. "Then we move faster." They broke into a run. Leora held securely, in Kane's arms. Doors ahead opened, spilling Krail soldiers into the hallway. Morrow raised his rifle, firing short bursts to drive them back, hitting walls and floor to create sparks and smoke. Kane ducked into a side corridor, leading the team toward the service ladder. More alarms joined the first, and the hum of the fortress grew louder, the sound of defenses powering up. When they reached the ladder, Kane handed Leora to Sarah, so he could climb first. The others followed quickly. But just as Drav began to climb, a drone swooped in from the hall, its light locking on him. "Go!" Drav shouted, pulling a small EMP from his belt. He threw it at the drone, and it exploded in a flash, the machine crashing to the floor. Drav scrambled up the ladder behind them. They dropped back into the maintenance corridor, running for the drainage tunnel. But as they reached the grate, another door at the far end slammed open. A squad of Krail soldiers charged in, their steps shaking the floor. Kane turned, scanning the pipes above them. Steam hissed from one pipe where a seal was loose. He pulled a small charge from his belt and slapped it onto the pipe. "Cover your eyes!" he called. The charge exploded, and scalding steam filled the corridor, creating a thick white wall. Krail shouts echoed from the other side, but they couldn't see through the fog. Kane led the team into the tunnel, the storm's distant roar, growing louder with each step. They emerged into the canyon outside, the wind immediately pulling at them. Lightning split the sky above, and acid rain began to fall in light drops. Leora clung to Kane's shoulder, her face pressed into his armor. The Starcrest's landing zone was still a kilometer away. They moved as quickly as the rough ground allowed, keeping low whenever a patrol drone buzzed overhead. In the distance, the fortress alarms were still wailing. The Krail would send ships soon. Almost there, Kane told Leora. Hold on. Back. Inside the fortress, a commander stared at the security feed, watching the small figure in the human's arms. He slammed his fist onto the console. All forces, intercept them before they reach orbit. Ending hook for Part 3. As Kane's team reached the edge of the canyon, the shadow of a massive warship passed over them, blocking out the storm's lightning. The enemy had found them. The ground shook as the massive Krail warship passed overhead. Its black hull cut across the storm clouds, flashing red lights that scanned the surface. Kane's visor lit up with warning symbols. The ship's sensors were sweeping the canyon. Move, Kane ordered. The team broke into a run, their boots splashing through shallow pools of acidic rain. Every drop hissed as it hit the reinforced suits. Morrow glanced up. They've got fighters launching from the bay. Lightning flashed, and Kane caught sight of 3 small ships dropping from the warship's underside. Their wings spread like sharp blades, engines roaring against the wind. We need cover, Kane said. Canyons ahead, go right. They reached a narrow cut in the rock just as the fighters roared past, scanning the ground. Kane pressed Leora close against his chest, shielding her from the rain and wind. Sarah checked her scanner. They're circling back. We don't have long. Drav pointed ahead. That ridge. Beyond it is the storm's lightning field. They won't risk flying low through that. Kane nodded. Then that's where we're going. They pushed forward, the wind screaming in their ears. The ridge was steep, the stone slick under the rain. Kane climbed first, testing each foothold before helping Leora up. Sarah and Morrow kept watch behind, their weapons ready. Halfway up, the fighters came around again, their searchlights sweeping across the ridge. Down! Kane shouted. They pressed themselves flat against the rock as a beam of light passed, just meters above their heads. When the fighters moved on, they climbed the rest of the way. The ridge opened into a jagged plateau. Lightning cracked across the sky, striking the ground in blinding bursts. The air smelled sharp, metallic, charged with energy. Leora's voice was small in the calm. It's loud. Kane tightened his grip on her hand. Stay close to me and we'll get through. Drav led the way, his visor tracking the lightnings. Pattern. Storm strikes run in clusters. We move between them. It was slow, careful work. They would run forward a few meters, then drop behind a rock as bolts slammed into the ground nearby. Each strike lit the sky white, and the thunder rolled like a wave. Once, a bolt hit so close that the heat washed over them even through the suits. Leora gasped, but Kane's steady voice kept her moving. Finally, they reached the far edge of the lightning field. Below, a winding canyon stretched toward the Starcrest's landing zone. The ship's faint signal blinked on Kane's visor, close enough to reach if they moved fast. Then Sarah's warning tone beeped. We've got company. Kane turned to see a squad of Krail soldiers emerging from the far side of the plateau. They moved quickly, their armor glowing faintly in the stormlight. Down the slope, Kane ordered. They slid down into the canyon, loose rock scattering under their boots. The Krail followed, their voices carrying over the wind. Morrow tossed, a smoke charge behind them. Thick gray clouds filled the slope, slowing their pursuers, but not stopping them. The canyon twisted, forcing the team to run single file. Kane stayed in the middle, keeping Leora between him and Sarah. Drav took the lead, searching for the fastest route. As they rounded a bend, the ground shook violently. A massive storm beast, a low, four-legged creature with armored scales, stepped into their path. Its eyes glowed faint blue and it growled low, warning them away. "Detour?" Morrow asked. "No time," Kane replied. He stepped forward slowly, keeping Leora behind him. The beast sniffed the air, its head lowering toward him. Kane reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar. He placed it on the ground, then stepped back. The beast sniffed it once, then began chewing. Kane waved the team forward quietly. They passed without a sound, the beast too busy eating to care. The canyon opened onto a wide plain of black stone. At the far side, the star crest waited, its lights faint through the rain. But between them and the ship, a patrol of 6 Krail soldiers stood guard, sent from the warship above. "They've blocked the path," Sarah said. Kane scanned the ground. A shallow ridge ran along the left side, just high enough to hide. "Them if they crawled?" "We go along that ridge, circle behind them," Kane decided. They moved slowly, the storm winds whipping at their backs. When they reached the rear of the patrol, Kane gave the signal. Morrow tossed a sound charge far to the right. The Krail turned toward the noise, their weapons ready. The team sprinted the last meters to the Starcrest's ramp. Drav hit the control panel, and the ramp lowered with a hiss. Just as Leora stepped inside, a fighter screamed overhead, firing a warning shot that exploded nearby. The Krail patrol turned and opened fire, bolts slamming into the ridge. "Morrow, shields up!" Kane shouted. The ship's shields flared to life, deflecting the incoming blasts. Sarah pulled Leora deeper into the cabin, strapping her into a safety seat. Kane ran to the cockpit, taking the co-pilot's chair beside Morrow. "Get us in the air now!" Engines roared, and the Starcrest lifted from the plane. The warship loomed, above launching more fighters. Morrow's hands flew over the controls. "They'll be on us in seconds!" Kane's eyes narrowed. "Then we disappear before they can lock on." He activated the storm cloaking system, a risky move that used the lightning's energy to mask their ship's signal. The shields flickered, but the Starcrest vanished from the warship's scans. Through the cockpit window, Kane saw the enemy fighters scatter in confusion. One flew too close to a lightning strike and spiraled out of control, crashing into the planes below. The others turned back toward the warship, unwilling to chase blind into the storm. Inside, the crew finally allowed themselves to breathe. Leora unfastened her seat straps and looked up at Kane. "You didn't let them take me back," she said quietly. "Not while I'm here," Kane replied, his voice steady. Drav checked the navigation. "We're clear of the moon's gravity. Next, stop, Virelia." Kane gave a single nod. But in the back of his mind, he knew the Krail wouldn't let this go so easily. They had taken the princess once, and they would try again. Ending hook for Part 4. Far above, in the warship's command room, a Krail officer stared at the empty radar screen. His voice was cold as he gave the order. "Track them. Follow them to their home." The war between the alien kingdom and the outer colonies had reached its breaking point. The human warrior, Captain Aaron Blake, stood at the center of the alien queen's war room. Around him, tall alien commanders studied holographic maps that displayed glowing red enemy positions. Queen Serenia watched him carefully. She was still unsure how a single human could promise victory when even her finest generals struggled. But her daughter, Princess Lyra, had faith in him, and Serenia could not deny that the human had already done the impossible by bringing Lyra back from enemy territory. Aaron took a slow breath. "We can't win by fighting head-on," he said, pointing to the largest red cluster on the map. "They have more ships, more weapons, and stronger shields. But they also have one weakness: They believe you will always fight like you always have. We need to surprise them. One alien, Commander scoffed. And what do you suggest, human? That we run and hide? Aaron shook his head. No, I'm saying we fight differently. We hit where they don't expect. We make them think we are somewhere else, while we strike at the heart of their supply lines. Princess Lyra leaned forward, her silver eyes full of curiosity. You mean, trick them? Exactly, Aaron replied. In my world, there's a saying, you can't feed an army without food or fuel. If we destroy their supply depots, they'll be forced to retreat, even if they still have ships. The Queen crossed her arms. It is a dangerous idea. The supply depots are deep inside enemy space. We would need to pass through 3 layers of defense. Aaron smiled faintly. That's why we won't take an army. We'll take a small, fast strike team, a few ships, no big battle. Just in, destroy the supplies, and get out before they know what happened. The war room went quiet. The alien commanders exchanged glances. The plan was risky, but it was also bold. And boldness was something the enemy never expected from their cautious queen. Finally, Serenia spoke. Very well, human. You will lead this mission. My daughter will go with you. Aaron hesitated. With respect, Your Majesty, this will be dangerous. If Lyra— I am not afraid, Lyra interrupted. I spent months in enemy territory and survived. I will not hide now. The Queen's gaze softened. She looked between the human and her daughter, then gave a short nod. You both leave at dawn. The next day, the strike team prepared for departure. The ships were sleek, black, and built. For speed, Aaron walked through the docking bay, checking every system himself. Lyra followed him, wearing light combat armor that gleamed under the lights. You've done this before? She asked. Aaron smirked. More times than I can count. Back on Earth, I was part of a unit that specialized in small, fast operations. We never won by strength. We won by thinking faster. Lyra tilted her head. That's what makes humans different, isn't it? You don't give up even when the odds are against you, Aaron chuckled. Something like that. But don't think this will be easy. We'll need to move fast, stay quiet, and trust each other completely. Lyra nodded. Then I trust you. They launched before sunrise, their ships vanishing into the darkness of space. The journey to the enemy's supply sector took hours, and every minute was tense. They had to slip past patrol ships and avoid detection. Aaron sat in the cockpit of his vessel, his eyes scanning the radar. Stay close, everyone. If one of us is spotted, the whole mission is over. As they reached the enemy's territory, Aaron gave new orders. We split into 2 teams. Team 1 will create a distraction by attacking a minor outpost. Team 2, that's us, will sneak into the depot while they're busy. Lyra's voice came through the comms. Understood. Moving to position. Minutes later, distant explosions lit up the darkness. The enemy's attention turned to the small battle near the outpost. Aaron guided his ship toward the massive floating depot, a fortress of metal, glowing with energy fields. This is it, he muttered. Remember, we're not here to fight everyone, just the depot. They slipped past the outer defenses, using the chaos as cover. Aaron's hands moved quickly over the controls. He had studied the depot's schematics for hours, and he knew exactly where to strike. Lock torpedoes on the fuel tanks, he ordered. Lyra's ship lined up beside his. Locked and ready. Fire. Twin bursts of light shot forward, striking the depot's core. A massive explosion rippled outward, tearing through the supply structures. Fires spread quickly, and the entire station began to break apart. Time. To go! Aaron shouted. They turned sharply, racing away from the burning wreck. Behind them, enemy ships scrambled to respond. But by the time they realized what had happened, the strike team was already vanishing into the darkness of space. Hours later, they returned to the alien capital. The Queen was waiting on the landing platform, her face unreadable. Aaron stepped out first, followed by Lyra. "It's done," Aaron said simply. "Their supply lines are gone. They'll have to pull back." For a moment, Serenia said nothing. Then, slowly, a small smile appeared on her face. "You have done more than my armies have in months, human. Perhaps I was wrong to doubt you." Aaron shrugged. "I'm just doing what I can. The war isn't over yet." Lyra stepped forward, her voice full of pride. "Mother, the humans' plan worked perfectly. The enemy didn't even see us coming." The Queen looked at Aaron, and for the first time there was respect, true, unguarded respect in her eyes. "Then perhaps," she said, "the final victory is closer than I thought." The Starcrest glided into Virelia's atmosphere, its engines humming softly against the blue sky. Captain Elias Kane stood at the cockpit, watching the familiar landscape grow beneath them. Mountains, forests, and shimmering rivers stretched out in peaceful beauty, a world he had come to respect deeply. Beside him, Princess Leora sat quietly, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and nervousness. She had spent so long trapped in enemy hands that this return felt almost like a dream. The ship touched down gently on the royal landing platform. Guards in shining armor lined the pathway to the palace. At the center stood Queen Serenia, her silver hair shining in the sunlight, her eyes fixed on the ramp. As the ramp lowered, Kane stepped forward and took Leora's hand. She hesitated for a moment, then moved toward her mother. The Queen's voice was soft but strong. "Leora!" The princess ran into her arms, tears streaming down both their faces. Serenia held her daughter tightly. "You are safe. You are home." Kane stood to the side, watching quietly. For months, he had risked everything to bring this moment to life. Now, the pain of loss was replaced by a new hope. After the reunion, Kane was invited inside the palace for a formal ceremony. The court was filled with nobles, soldiers, and diplomats from many worlds. Serenia took Kane's hands in hers. "You saved my daughter," she said. "You saved my people." Kane shook his head. "I only did what anyone should do. No child should be lost to war." The Queen smiled, a warmth in her eyes. "Then humanity is a light in the darkness." Later, in private, Serenia asked Kane why he had risked so much for a people not his own. He looked at her simply. "Because I believe all life matters, because hope can cross any star." Their conversation was interrupted by Leora, holding out a small pendant. "It's for you," she said shyly. "It's the royal crest of Virelia, a symbol of trust and friendship." Kane accepted the gift with honor. He knew this moment was more than just a thanks. It was a promise of alliance. Days later, peace talks began between Virelia and the Krail Dominion. With the princess safe and the humans' help, the war-weary planets had a chance to rebuild. Kane stayed on Virelia as a trusted envoy, bridging the gap between worlds. He trained new diplomats and peacekeepers, sharing lessons from his own battles. Leora grew stronger, her spirit unbroken by her captivity. With Kane's friendship, she began to understand that strength came from unity, not just power. Queen Serenia often stood on the palace balcony, watching the stars. She thought of her daughter's return and the human who had changed everything. A new hope shone in her heart, one born from courage, sacrifice, and unexpected friendship. The story of the human warrior who rescued the lost princess became a legend. Songs were sung, stories told across many planets. Humans were no longer just strangers from a distant star. They were heroes, friends, and protectors. And in the quiet moments, Kane would look up at the night sky, knowing that somewhere out There, a queen and her daughter were watching the stars too, connected by a bond that would never be broken.